So today, what we will do is we will go on a trip from London to Hong Kong. And then later on, if we've got time, we can have questions and answers, or if we run out of time, then I can take questions if you want to talk to me afterwards, and I'll try and answer them at the next talk. Other talks I'm going to do this time, I'm going to do one on air traffic control, which is quite interesting, a very short history of air traffic control, and then again we'll go around the world and we will deal with air traffic controllers all around the world. Some are very good, you feel safe with them, others you think, I think I'll just do this bit of air traffic control myself. Like going down over Africa, you finish up doing it yourself sometimes anyway when you can't talk to anybody. So air traffic control is one, and then we'll have a look at our wonderfully glamorous cabin crew. The last one will be called Glamour in the Skies, which is quite a fun one, how we interact with our gorgeous cabin crew. And I will ask the question, I'm not sure if I'll be able to answer it or not, perhaps you can answer it for me, is why there are so few female pilots. It's about 5% overall. 5% of pilots, right across the board, from private pilots all the way up to airline transport pilots, are female. And I don't understand that. I really cannot understand. What's wrong with the job, girls?
They don't have as much fun.
It's what?
They don't have as much fun.
They don't have as much fun? You've got to be kidding me. You're going to tell me that Captain Ingo doesn't have fun? Our captain on this ship, you're going to tell me she doesn't have fun? Yeah, she's up there with them. She's among the best. You've got to be good. And the girls are equally as good, but I don't know why. I'm being serious. I don't know why it's only 5%. We digress. Right, let's go to Hong Kong. So we'll just hop in the old jumbo at Heathrow there, and we'll just fly down to Hong Kong, shall we? It's not far, is it really? It looks pretty straightforward. It's not quite as simple as that, as perhaps you might imagine. So what we normally fly on a long-haul route, you may have heard ship's captains using this expression as well, it's called a great circle track. Because the shortest distance between 2 points on the Earth's surface is not a straight line, okay? That would not be the shortest distance between London and Hong Kong. So this is a great circle track, which actually describes the shortest distance between 2 points. Okay, so you think, right, taking off from Heathrow, really? Okay, up over Denmark, really? Southern Sweden, really? Estonia perhaps, or Latvia, over Russia, down over Kazakhstan, and then down through mainland China and into Hong Kong. Trust me, it's true, it works that way. So it becomes even more apparent if, say, we were going from New York to Hong Kong. Okay? That way, we wouldn't come across the Atlantic and across Europe and all the way around that way. No. We go straight over the top, right over the top of the world. That's the shortest distance between New York and Hong Kong, let's say, or if we're going to Tokyo, it would be the same thing. Okay, literally right over the North Pole and then down the other side of the world again. If you don't believe me, go up to the library and have a look at that lovely big globe they've got up there. A piece of string, and run it around the globe there, and you'll see what I am saying. So when we get to the airport, we normally arrive about an hour and a half before departure, and we go to the briefing office, where we are briefed by a gentleman who is called our aircraft dispatcher. Very highly skilled man. He and his computer will have done most of the work for us nowadays by the time we get to the airport. Up until, I don't know, 20 years ago, 25 years ago, we probably had to do most of the work ourselves in filing flight plans, preparing the fuel log, the navigation log. Everything was done by us, but now, because it is so involved and so complicated, we have assistance in doing it by the dispatcher and his computer. Now, this gentleman, he will brief us on every aspect of the flight that he can think of. He'll brief us on security, for example. Any threat against the airport, the airline, that flight number, on that specific day, if they've had any warnings from any terror groups that an attack is imminent or in the offing, he will know about that and he will pass the information on to that. More of that in a minute. He'll brief us on the technical aspect of the aircraft. If there's anything wrong with the airplane, you probably don't want to hear this, but we can dispatch with things that don't work on the airplane. We've got so much redundancy built into the systems on all the parts of the aircraft. We've got 4 engines, for example. We've got 4 generators, 1 on each engine. So if one's not working, you think, yeah, that's all right, we can go without one working, that's not a problem. And as long as we've got 3, And then if we lose another one, you think, oh, down to 2. If we lose another one, it's not our day, let's be honest. You're down to 1 generator. Then you might have to start thinking a little bit, what am I going to do if this one packs up as well? Okay, we've still got battery power, which will allow us to get the aircraft safely on the ground somewhere. Probably not where we want to be, that's the only problem. Now, fuel, of course, although it's come down in price recently, thank goodness, so we should see fares dropping. Yeah, that'll be right. Like petrol prices at the pumps. The price of oil's come down 40%, and the price of petrol's come down, what, 8 pence a gallon or something, 8 pence a litre, should I say, sorry. So the fuel that we carry on board the aircraft, we only carry enough fuel for as what we need to complete the flight. We don't take it up to the pumps and say, fill her up. Very, very seldom do we do that. Only on an ultra long haul flight where we need every ounce of fuel that we can get on board. Now, we calculate how much fuel we need. And that amount of fuel is what is required to start up, obviously, taxi out to the end of the runway, take off, climb up to our cruising altitude, cruise at that altitude, descend, make an approach down to our decision height at the other end. For some reason at that stage we can't land. The runway ahead of us has been blocked for some reason. We then have to perform a go-around, climb up, climb away, go to our alternate airport, hold for between 15 and 30 minutes at that airport, and then go ahead and land, and still have emergency fuel in the tanks. So that's how we calculate the fuel requirements. He will tell us how we're going to get out of the airport, what the procedures are for getting out of the airport. He will also again brief us on passengers on board. If we're carrying heads of state, VIPs, ministers, cabinet ministers, government ministers, foreign heads of state on board, he will tell us who they are, where they're sitting. These guys may or may not have their own security on board the aircraft. Okay? Now, if they are carrying their own security, are those security guys armed? Yes, they are. Where are they sitting? What ammunition are they carrying? What pistols are they carrying? What ammunition are they carrying? Who is going to be in command of the cabin should an incident, as it's called, occur? Okay? Does the chief steward maintain command of his cabin, or does the chief marshal take control of the situation in the cabin? And this varies from flight to flight, but I was fortunate in that it never ever happened to me, I'm pleased to say. But that's the sort of things that we have to look at. The most important thing at this stage to us is the destination weather. Of course, going to Hong Kong in the typhoon season, the weather can change within 5-10 minutes at a time. So we have to know, the Met man has to forecast for her what the weather in Hong Kong is like 12, 15, 18 hours from now. And he has to get it pretty well right to make sure that we are going to be at Hong Kong in conditions which are going to permit us to land within various limits of wind, runway condition, cloud base. All of that has to be taken into account. Okay, the cabin crew, they'll normally brief separately to us, but say if we are carrying heads of state or VIPs, then we will probably brief together so that we have this exchange of information between us. So we get to the aircraft about probably about 45 minutes before departure. And you may have noticed there's sometimes that you'll see either the captain or the co-pilot will come down from the flight deck and will do what's called a walk round, an external check around the aircraft, just to make sure the engineers haven't missed anything, that's all. And they very, very seldom do, it has to be said. So it can either be me or the co-pilot who does it, doesn't really matter. If it's a nice spring morning, then I'll probably do it. If it's pouring with rain or freezing cold, then of course the co-pilot will do it. It's quite a long walk for an old man anyway, all the way around there. So normally the co-pilot will do it. We get our air traffic control clearance before we leave the gate. We push back and start, and then we taxi out. Once we've got all the paperwork, we can calculate all the critical speeds which are going to affect us during takeoff. You may have heard of these speeds, they're called the V speeds, the velocity of the aircraft speeds. V1, VR, V2 are the ones we're interested in. V1 speed is the speed at which we can reject the takeoff, in other words, stop the aircraft on the runway available to us, or we could go. We have a choice. Before that speed, we're probably going to stop. After that speed, we can't stop. We've got to go. It doesn't matter what happens, we have got to go. Because there isn't enough runway to stop the aircraft at that weight, on that runway, at that altitude, at that temperature. All these factors are all built into these calculations. So on a jumbo, the rough figures are, our decision speed is normally around about 160 knots, 180 miles an hour, thereabouts. We rotate the aircraft into its flying attitude by raising the nose, increasing the lift over the wing and getting the aircraft off the ground at about 190 miles an hour, and our initial climb speed is between 210, 220, 230 miles an hour, depending on the aircraft weight. Now, the fuel figures I mentioned before, the fuel load that we carry, it can be anything up to 170 tons of fuel on board this aircraft. Okay, that's about 48,000 imperial gallons, or if we've got the Americans in, that's about 57,000 of your puny American gallons, or about 216,000 litres. It's quite a lot. And this is the sort of layout. Don't worry about the plumbing too much. It's quite a complicated plumbing system. All the fuel tanks feeding into all the 4 engines there. A simplified plan I'll show you in a minute. Yeah, that's a more generalized look at the fuel tanks. So the wings, as you can see, they are just huge, huge fuel tanks. And in the belly of the aircraft here, it's called the central fuel tank, and that alone carries about 38 tons of fuel. The horizontal stabilizer tank, that carries another 10 tons of fuel right at the back of the aeroplane here, and that will be pumped forward into the center tank at a point in flight to keep the center of gravity of the aircraft at its optimum level. Now, the aircraft itself weighs about 400 tons as we turn onto the runway at its maximum takeoff weight. 170 tons of fuel, that's about 42% of the mass of the aircraft. The weight of the aircraft is about 42% is fuel sloshing around in all these huge big tanks. If you see an aircraft fully loaded, a jumbo fully loaded with fuel, on the ground, you'll see the wingtips hanging down, something like that. That is because of the mass of that fuel in the wings and the weight of the engines, of course, hanging down as well. As we rotate the aircraft into the flying attitude and transfer the weight from the wheels onto the wings, those wing tips flex upwards by about 12 feet on the jumbo. And this is sometimes, you will notice this in flight, we go through turbulence, you will see the wings flapping like that. People get worried about this. Don't be worried about that. It's supposed to do that. If it stops flapping, worry. or if there's nothing left to flap, worry. They have to flap, because if they didn't flap, then they would snap. It's like a supple twig or a dry twig. You know, they have to be able to flex. So that's that. Now, when we are flying on long-haul routes, we have on board the aircraft our very own crew rest facilities. Okay, this is the cabin crew rest facility. It's up in the tail of the jumbo. Maybe you've seen the cabin crew vanish up a little ladder sometimes. They vanish up there when they finish their main service for the flight. They vanish upstairs and they go to sleep for a couple of hours, which is fine. On a long sector, you need some rest. And it's not because we're lazy or anything. One passenger did ask me if this is the members' lounge of the Mile High Club, but I had to disappoint him on that one. But by having these rest facilities on board, we can extend our duty hours. Okay? Normally we can do about 14 hours on duty. By having these rest facilities on board, we can increase our maximum duty period up to 19 hours, which is quite a long time. Okay, we would normally have 2 captains, 2 co-pilots, so we can take turns at having rest and flying the aeroplane so that we're all nice and refreshed when we get to our destination. That's the cabin crews, as I say. Our rest area is just behind the flight deck. It's not me, it's one of my colleagues. Ours is just behind the flight deck so that we can get back onto the flight deck quickly if anything goes wrong. So we've been airborne for 12 hours now, I suppose. We've covered about 6,000 miles. And we'll be coming in to Hong Kong, down over China, mainland China there, and then we'll be handed over by Chinese air traffic control to the Hong Kong air traffic control authorities. Lantau Island, that's where they built the new airport, and it's very nice, those of you who have been there, you'll know. But the old airport was at Kowloon. Now, I'm told, I haven't been there yet, perhaps you can help me out on this one, that the old runway is still there, but it's now a cruise terminal. They built a whole new luxury cruise terminal right in the center of the harbor there. So, coming into the old Hong Kong airport, it was unusual in that because we had high ground up to the north here in the new territories, we had to fly what's called an offset approach. Okay? So coming in, we would fly from west to east on a virtually easterly heading, just about down to that point of the green arrow there. And then we would start a turn to line up with that little yellow strip there. That yellow strip there, that is the old runway built out into the harbour. And this is a slightly blurred Google picture, I'm afraid. But this is the old runway here. And that is where they have now built a whole new cruise terminal. It's a great idea for an otherwise fairly useless runway. Part of it's gone to commercial and residential, and the rest of it is the cruise terminal. So, flying, as I say, from west to east down to this point here, it then meant making a fairly low-level turn to get lined up with the runway. And up here on a little hill, there was what's called a checkerboard. Now, the checkerboard I'll show you again in a minute. But having got to this point here, it's about 600 feet above the ground, we then have to start a turn to get lined up with the runway, which is just coming into view there, the top right-hand corner of the slide there. So, it's not an aerobatic maneuver if we get it right. If we get it wrong, it can become an aerobatic maneuver. So we try and avoid that if we possibly can. There's the checkerboard there. That used to be mandatory. You had to be able to see the checkerboard, but now they've got different landing aids installed, so we don't actually have to see that. They've left that there as a piece of historical interest. Although, as I say, this airport is no longer in use. So that's another of our aircraft just coming around the corner there to get lined up with the runway. And this one, he's probably just about to roll his wings level there. And in the background there, you'll see that high ground that I mentioned, which is why we cannot make that approach a straight-in approach as we would do to 99 out of 100 other airports. So that is why we have to do this offset approach, because we can't have clearance over that high ground. Now, it is possible sometimes that things can go a little bit wrong. As we come round the corner there to get lined up with the runway, it's about a 45 to 50 degree turn we have to make. Okay? We only need about 30 degrees of bank. Okay? That's not a steep turn by any stretch of the imagination. But you have to, as you're coming round the corner, assess the effect of the wind. Now, in this guy's case, the wind has been blowing him from right to left. Okay? That runway direction there is a southeasterly direction. The wind is probably blowing from the southwest, and it has blown him through the centre line like that. So he's got a choice now. He can either throw the approach away, climb out through that gap straight ahead of him there, or he can make a recovery to get lined up with the runway centre line again there. And he's got plenty of time to do it. There's not a problem with that. Here he is, he's making the correction to that runway, and he's just about to turn the other way again now, turn back to the left to get lined up. Okay, so he's just overcorrected there, ever so slightly, and he's just gone slightly to the right of the centre line here. Not a problem, he's got plenty of space to manoeuvre. The only problem he has facing him now, because of that wind is still blowing from right to left, if you remember on this slide, the wind has got underneath that right wing, and it's trying to lift that right wing upwards. Right wing up, left wing down. Not a problem so far. Problem is, this engine here is getting very, very close to the runway surface. And it has happened that we can scrape the pod, as it's called, a pod scrape, and you get this horrible gronching noise. It comes out of next month's salary. And, you're called in to have a chat to the chief pilot the following morning. But the iconic one, of course, is of the old Jumbo flying in between the apartment blocks in Kowloon as he makes his final approach into the runway. And the old story goes that as you come around the corner and you're sitting on this side of the aircraft here, you can look in through the windows and see what the Chinese people are having for lunch. And you can pick up somebody's Y-fronts on the wingtip here, because all the laundry is hanging out to dry on sticks here outside the thing. So you finish up with a pair of bra and a pair of panties on the wings, then you know something's gone wrong. Now things can, as I say, go slightly wrong. I'm just going to skip a slide here, excuse me. Things can go slightly wrong if you come in a little bit too fast, the runway's a bit slippery, perhaps it may be wet, maybe you landed a little bit far down the runway, or, you know, things just haven't, it just hasn't been your day. In which case, in this one here, I mean, I don't think the passengers even got their feet wet. I think they just deployed the slides, all the rescue craft were there. They, you know, they took the aircraft away, took it back to the hangar. It was back flying again 3 months later. So, but with that one, again, it's a trip to the chief pilot the following morning for a cup of tea. No biscuits on this particular occasion. And this is another one of the view of the approach. And again, he looks as if he's going to be a bit high here, doesn't he? But he's not. He's going to be fine there. There's not a problem there at all for him. Some of the places we go to, I'll show you very quickly. We're almost out of time, actually. It's a shame. I'm just going to show you that as a very short film. And the film starts with the aircraft coming towards us on that easterly heading. And in about 20 seconds, you'll see him as he begins to make that turn to line up with the runway. Okay? He's in his landing configuration there now. He's got his flaps down, his wheels are down. He's still flying towards us. Hope he doesn't fly into the tree. He didn't last time I ran the film. So he's going to start his turn now. Start your turn now, that's a good chap. There you go. There he goes, round the corner there. Now, because the wind is blowing from his right, in other words, it's blowing left to right now, okay, it blows him through the center line. And then he gets back on the center line again, and you'll see the aircraft is pointing in one direction and flying in another. That's to allow for that drift, like swimming across a river, right? You have to aim upstream. Okay? Now, he's going to line the aircraft up with the runway at this stage. If he had touched down at the correct point, like now, it would have been great. But he didn't. He just left it that second late, so he lands almost sideways across the runway, hence that great puff of smoke from the tires as he touches down on the runway there. It's a little bit uncomfortable, it feels uncomfortable, it doesn't feel right to a pilot landing the aircraft sideways like that. But if you speak to the Boeing engineers about it, they say, oh, don't worry about it, it'll be okay. Yeah, it's designed to be flown by idiots. Okay, if you say so, very good. If you've been to St. Martin on your cruises, have you been there? That's quite an interesting airport. It's a tourist attraction in its own right at St. Martin when they come across the beach very, very low there. Some of the aircraft do come in very low. On some of them you feel you could reach up and touch the wheels on some of them. And on that one there, that by the way, that's not the path of the aircraft, that's a flare in the lens of the camera on that one. But there he goes, across the beach. Across the hedge. And what the kids like to do is they like to hang on to this fence here down at the bottom. It's a fence with a sort of scaffold tube at the top. They like to hang on to that, and as the aircraft are taking off, as the captain winds the engines up to full power and the jet blast comes back, it blows the kids into the horizontal position. Once they're in the horizontal position, they let go and they get blown backwards across the beach into the sea. And this is thrills. This is cheap thrills for kids, you don't believe me. They've even got signs up saying, you know, don't do it. Jet blast of departing and arriving aircraft can cause severe physical harm resulting in extreme bodily harm and or death. This one here, warning, low flying and departing aircraft blast can cause physical injury. And I often wonder to myself, I wonder what made that hole in the bottom of the sign there. If I'm having a good day, I find myself thinking, well, I hope it wasn't somebody's head. If I'm having a really bad day, I find myself thinking, God, I hope that was somebody's head. But anyway, have we got anybody from Liverpool with us? Ah, okay, well this didn't happen in Liverpool then. This happened in Sheffield. Anybody from Sheffield? Okay, this happened in Sheffield. Okay, disregard the rest if I can find it here. Now I'm just going to have to fast forward a little bit here, I think. Because this is, so as we don't offend anybody, you understand. There we go. Sheffield's sorry, Sheffield, or Birmingham. Otherwise you'll come back to find the wheels have been nicked. There we go. Next door is air traffic control on Sunday the 4th. No, it's not. Monday, isn't it? Where did I get that from? I must have entered that wrong. I think it's Monday or Tuesday, isn't it? Tuesday, I can't remember when the next talk is. Is it? Oh, you know more than I do. Okay. I'll check that, and, or you check that. And, anyway, I hope you enjoyed that, and I'll see you at the next talk whenever it is. Thank you.